What do we mean by a smart city? At the New Cities Foundation, which I'm very proud to lead, we look very closely indeed at the impact of technologies on urban development. And yet, I want to tell you something. Within the foundation, we actually ban the use of the term smart cities. I hate the term, but for the simple reason that the formula itself reduces the conversation around cities and the way they develop in the future to technology, to efficiency, to things, but not often to people. And indeed, smart city, the word smart city, first cropped up in the 1970s, in the early 1970s, when it was used to describe American cities, the way that American cities harness massive data sets to increase efficiency in public transportation. Later on, in the beginning of the mid-1990s, at the onset of the internet and the digital revolution, smart city was popularized by big technology groups like IBM, like Cisco, and others, to digitize the basic functions of a city: transportation, security, waste collection, and hopefully come up with more efficient city services. Yet several years ago, we began to realize that simply pouring technology into a city, automating services, bringing them online, etc., cannot and must not be an end in itself. There are plenty of urban geographies around the world where technology is utilized ubiquitously, and yet they remain sterile, unhappy places in which to live and work, in which citizens feel somehow disconnected from each other. Not havens of well-being, in other words. I won't name names here. It's not Dubai, by the way. And there are also examples of cities where the digital revolution hasn't yet arrived in a big way, but which are in many instances, and there's no other word for it, pretty happy places to live. So the goal, I think, and I believe, for all those who work in cities, such as myself, who are working to transform the urban space, has to be urban well-being. And we try to put that at the center of everything we do. And I believe and I hope that cities around the world are on the cusp of a great change in mindset. And I think this previous conversation is an example of that, that goes from smart cities to well-being cities. And I certainly, by the way, I would like to commend the government of Dubai for not only leading the digitalization of the city with Smart Dubai, when all that implies, embedding digital technologies in the management of this amazing urban area, but for also combining this with a unique focus on well-being and happiness. And it's really quite extraordinary. And I think this is the approach that many other global cities can and should emulate. On a global level, we are, I think, beginning to see a shift that moves us away from this kind of very strong tech-only focus to leveraging technology to predict and to answer the needs of citizens. This shift implies enabling citizens to connect with each other. That's what it's all about. It's all about connection. To connect with each other, to connect with city administrations, improving access to quality education, which can prepare citizens for the needs of the 21st century economy, improving the quality of air and water and housing. But it's above all about putting people at the core of all actions. Urban well-being depends on a variety, quite a long variety of sustained efforts by public and private stakeholders to make progress across multiple areas. And one area in particular that we focus on a lot is mobility. And there's nothing more fundamental for a city than having efficient, safe, and speedy multimodal transportation options. Mobility, after all, in a very, very fundamental way, defines how we experience our cities. When it works well, it allows us to take full advantage of the opportunities that a city can represent, that presents, and in all parts of the city that we live in. Not only do we need functional and up-to-date mobility options, but we need systems which connect and work with one another. We are, ladies and gentlemen, entering an urban mobility revolution, a revolution that in so many ways stands, I think, to be even more consequential and impactful than the IT revolution. And again, I think we see Dubai leading in some of these areas. This mobility revolution will reshape the geography of cities, of all cities, big and small around the world. It will change the way that we think about work and play and living in cities and where we do those functions. This is a revolution that in fact stands to alter our very notions of space and time and movement, and those are pretty fundamental things. Just take an example from my home country, Columbus, Ohio. Now, Smart Columbus, which in many ways is a mirror of Smart Dubai, has worked very hard to ensure that citizens have options and access. By leveraging mobility as a service options, citizens in Columbus can now plan and pay for trips involving multiple transport modes from one central place. This could be rideshare, it could be micromobility like electric scooters, bike sharing, in addition to public transport, autonomous shuttles that service destinations around downtown and the like. And thousands of cities around the world are beginning to experiment with these options, are going down this path, which is great. For example, there's a startup in Columbus called Share, which is not surprisingly a rideshare company, and it specializes in worker commutes, in getting workers from their wherever they live to where they work. And its mission is explicit about ensuring that people show up to work rested and not stressed. And I can tell you 90% of commuters in modern cities today are not rested and they're very stressed. And the point is that we can now imagine a city like Columbus, Ohio, functioning without personal vehicle ownership at scale. And that, I think, is the future of our cities, of many of our cities. And Andrew Ginthner, who's the very capable mayor of Columbus, recently put it very well. And he said that mobility, quote, mobility is the great equalizer of the 21st century and will be vital in connecting the disconnected, opening ladders of opportunity, and growing and sharing our prosperity. This is what a city should be about. Now, anybody who works in cities knows of Jane Jacobs, and I love this quote from Jane Jacobs' seminal 1961 book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, which is a kind of Bible for many urbanists around the world. And she was, of course, one of the most insightful and most critical voices on cities. Now, another thing that Jacobs was fond of saying was that not TV and not illegal drugs, but the automobile has been the chief destroyer of American communities. Not TV and not illegal drugs, but the automobile has been the chief destroyer of American communities, and I happen to agree with that. The urban mobility revolution now gives cities the chance to reinvent themselves everywhere, and really to make them true havens of well-being. And we'll move away from the 21st century model of urban mobility that led to cities completely structured around the automobile, around individually owned internal combustion engines. Los Angeles is structured around its freeways. Dubai is structured around Sheikh Zayed Road to a large extent. 21st century mobility means, yes, new clean energy options, obviously, hyperconnectivity, ubiquitous cloud-to-edge connectivity that will enable autonomous mobility at scale. That's kind of a given over the next decade. But once again, we have choices to make, and very, very important ones. If we launch these new mobility technologies without putting well-being in there as a core principle, we will have simply unlivable cities. As Charles said, I mean, imagine 10 years from now, I will send my autonomous vehicle out to get one donut and back. You can imagine the congestion that's going to cause. But if we think about it in a different way, if we structure it in a different way, and if we put well-being at the center, we can really have a new, sustainable, and positive outcome for cities. And as Robin Chase, who was the founder of Zipcar, which is a very early car-sharing group, as she famously put it, the choice before us is between heaven and hell. So now, an essential element of ensuring a heavenly urban future are public and hopefully green spaces. These spaces should feel like commons, allowing cities to engage with each other, to interact with each other. Now, New York's Central Park, for example, is a classic example. In the middle of one of the most densely urbanized patches of the planet, there's a massive green space where you can walk, you can run, you can picnic, you can have fun, you can talk to people, you can play chess. This is a free, public, and green space where you can hear and see wildlife, etc. New York would not be the same without it. But beyond the obvious environmental benefits of green space, there is a direct positive correlation between access to public green space and urbanites' mental well-being, social networks, and sense of community. Now, urban well-being, we think, also depends on strong, viable, and active feedback loops between urban residents and urban authorities, and among urban residents themselves. Residents of cities need to feel empowered to influence change in their neighborhoods and in their cities. And beyond just in Western Europe and the United States, the normal timetable, let's say, of municipal elections. It's not a question of numbers, but of diversity and empowering sometimes unheard voices and organization. And this is the coming of age of what we like to call crowd urbanism. And crowd urbanism uses technology to tap into the expertise, the knowledge, and the networks of citizens themselves. And it benefits both the cities and the people who live in them, and increases the quality of life and well-being. One good example it's in the photo, I think. There we go. Must be Paris. And indeed, Paris has, for several years, a participatory budget. And since 2014, about 5 years ago, the city of Paris has been inviting citizens, community groups, companies to regularly take part in the reinvention of its urban fabric. And every year, the city puts out a call for ideas, and thousands of participants submit proposals, which are openly discussed on a digital platform, and then submitted to the administration for a feasibility assessment. The city goes the extra mile and provides workshops and information to help citizens estimate and evaluate the worth and the costs of projects. They take a co-design approach to this to truly empower citizens in the design of ideas and projects. There's then a vote which helps decide where money goes in the city. And we're talking about a pretty reasonable chunk of the overall city annual municipal budget. Between 2014, when it began, and 2020, Paris is committing €500 million, which is about 5% of the city's total capital fund. And that is going to be increasing. And that is spent, that's the participatory budget part. And it's really quite extraordinary. Other cities are experimenting with this. Moscow, curiously enough, Madrid, and others. One of the benefits of this approach has been the breakdown of political divisions and fights and arguing and skepticism. Participatory budgeting enables people to come together around specific projects in their neighborhoods and their communities, such as recycling, such as school improvements, bicycle paths, etc. And they work them out together. Projects come from neighborhoods and not politicians. And we can think about these feedback loops not just between government and citizens, but also between the private sector and citizens. For example, electricity utilities and companies in the United States, but elsewhere, provide consumers with regular updates of consumption, which can prompt them to and nudge them to take action to modify their behavior by turning off the lights, by moderating the AC, by running the dishwasher at night to save power. And we're seeing this more and more within cities throughout the world. I mention these elements, efficient multimodal mobility options, green public spaces, and strong feedback loops. These are really essential building blocks to the happy city, to the well-being city. I wanted to say just a word about what we do. New Cities is an international nonprofit organization dedicated to making cities more inclusive, connected, healthy, and vibrant. In other words, all the elements of well-being. And in fact, we are now making a major commitment to the promotion of urban well-being, and on a global scale. Last June, we worked with the Novartis Foundation to launch the world's first global competition recognizing city-led action on urban well-being. It's the Well-Being City Award. We then partnered with other organizations such as Transdev, a big Paris-based mobility company, with Toyota, with others. The award recognizes cities that place well-being at the heart of their urban design, planning, and policies. So just as buildings, cars, and schools must have enforceable and measurable standards, so should cities when it comes to well-being. Our core idea, is that by highlighting examples of programs, policies, and initiatives designed to improve urban well-being, cities will be able to share and learn from one another, from best practices. The idea is to create data points and key performance indicators around well-being that can be applied on a global scale and for cities of all sizes. And just a few days ago, we released the list of semi-finalists, which I'm going to put on the screen, because more than 100 cities from 27 countries and 6 continents made submissions for the Well-Being City Award in this first edition. 16 cities around the world have just been shortlisted across different categories: community, sustainable environment, public health, economy, and opportunity. And these finalist cities are now submitting detailed applications, which will be reviewed by an esteemed jury of experts, including Aisha Carabo-Cachira, Daniel Libeskind, the architect, Edie Jorge Igaz-Vasquez, and Ariana Huffington, who I think spoke yesterday here. And I'm delighted now to have the opportunity to announce in person that our inaugural Wellbeing City Forum and the formal Wellbeing City Award ceremony will take place in Montreal in partnership with the City of Montreal and under the auspices of my good friend, Mayor Valérie Plante. It takes place 19th and 20th of June. You're all invited. It's going to gather mayors, senior executives, and innovators from government, private sector, and nonprofits around the world. If you're interested in attending, or for more detail, the website link is on the screen, I think. Yes, there we go. Or you can follow #WellbeingCity on Twitter. Let's all work together to improve urban well-being. Nothing could be more important in the 21st century. Our planet depends on it. Thank you. It's been a very great honor to address you.